Hello everyone and welcome to my draft review video. Now this is just going to be I guess a thought process into how I built this draft deck, basically what cards I picked, and yeah, just breaking down how that draft from last night went. It was a very small draft. It was only about 5 of us, I think, that showed up that night, but it was pretty cool. Definitely really fun to play with the new cards, and every time I get the new cards in hand and I'm able to play, it's always a good time. So we'll go through real fast. I don't know if this will be too much of a big hit of a video, but just kind of explaining my thought process on how many cards I ran, which cards I ran, and kind of a review even of how these guys perform, because this is probably the first time I've played with a good chunk of these cards. But yeah, without any further ado, let's stop yapping and get straight into the breakdown. So first off, I don't have the base here, but it was just a yellow base and Gar Saxon. Pretty much right off the bat, the 3 leaders that I had were pretty jank. It was Hondo and I think it was Bosk. And I didn't want to run Bosk just because I didn't have the bounties, and like relying on drafting all the bounties felt a little dicey. And I like consistency over, unknowingly or risking to try to get the cards that I absolutely need for a deck to run. And then Hondo also same kind of vibe as Bosk. Instead of bounties though, you need smuggle, whereas Gar Saxon just seemed to be the most stable, or I guess you could say the most consistent of those 3 picks, just because even if I have characters that just have shielded or even experience, like that'll count towards the +1 upgrade. So I like running characters like this, even like Krennic. I enjoyed playing Krennic a lot early in set 1, just because it's a very simple ability. You have to worry about too much, and it also technically, because it's not like an actionable leader, it means that you get to keep initiative a good chunk of the time, because they're usually going to spend a action to do something, whether it's on their leader or whatnot, and it pretty much saves you from having to do that. So you get 1 less action per turn and you keep the initiative, and I really do enjoy keeping the initiative in this game. So with that out of the way, let's just continue moving through here. We're sorted essentially via costs, so we'll go 1 to, I think 6 is the highest cost card, and equipment or not equipment, but upgrades and events are in the back of the stack. So on my 1-drops, I had Moisture Farmer. This was just like a leftover pick for me. I didn't prioritize this at all. It was okay. It was nice to have Restore 2, but it honestly felt pretty weak. Like, I don't like spending, number 1, you have to play the card and you don't get an immediate return. And the second thing is, every time you want to get that Restore 2, you have to spend an action to swing with it. It does nothing when it swings to heal 2. And I think just with how I like keeping initiative, having to spend on whole action just to heal 2, it didn't feel too good. I did manage to get like maybe 3 or 4 swings off max in 1 game, but aside from that, it just felt slow. It felt slow and I didn't like it too much. Covert strengths are honestly amazing. I've run these in pre-release events, I've run it in the draft now, and the fact that it costs 1 and you can just play it immediately when you draw it to heal 2, or not immediately, but like that same turn, you'll generally always have resources to play it if you have something weak on the field on the turn that you drew it. And it's just super nice to mess with the opponent's math. And sometimes like you'll see a ping come in, or you see them telegraph something on the board where they're trying to weaken down one of your guys to kill it, and being able to play this from hand for 1 is great. But it's also super nice to safely be able to smuggle the card as a resource and then play it from your resources for 3. Like it's super strong. I think this is like one of my favorite cards in the games that I've played. It's always been so impactful and has swung the tide of things pretty heavily whenever I pulled it out. So I was able to draft 2 of those and I enjoyed that a bunch. Really do like this card. Big fan of this card. Rich Reward was okay. This was also like kind of a leftover draft pick. It helped because I saw the experience tokens for the upgraded synergy with Gar Saxon, but I didn't really have any other bounty synergy, so I was kind of scared playing this, but I did manage to pull it off once, because I wasn't sure if I'd actually be able to get the bounty return. And it's just some of the bounties, I feel like unless you have an immediate way to claim it, it can end up tying up resources in your attention for just way too long, and I don't really like that. I like my plays to be super clean, and if it is a combo that I'm trying to play, like I want to pull that combo off quick. I don't really like long-term combos where I play something 1 turn and then 3 turns down, like then I can claim the thing. I don't really like how that feels. I feel like, especially with the back and forth nature of Star Wars, it's very easy for the opponent to do something like, I don't know, play Covert Strike or something in between those actions that can throw off your game plan. I think it's super easy, which is a good thing. It's super easy to disrupt your opponent's game plan. So I like short-term returns, and I just didn't. This is a little bit not that. Dr. Pershing was great. He definitely got me a couple of draws. I definitely did not like dropping him on the first turn just because he doesn't have an impact first turn. I would much rather wait until like later in the game and then play him like maybe turn 4, turn 5, once I have like a little bit of control on the board, to get that extra draw that leads me into my bombs or my late game. But it was good. I didn't mind playing him. I think I would be okay playing him earlier if I had more grit in the deck, because that was one thing I noticed as I started tapping or poking down some of my own grit cards, and then you get a draw and you're buffing up your grit cards. So I thought that was super cool synergy. But yeah, I just would be cautious playing him on the first turn because you give up a lot of pressure, you know, for a 0/5 card. So a couple ways you can make him better, but I think he's got some really good synergy with some cards, and yeah, I really like him. Fugitive Wookiee, an amazing card, I think, in my opinion, if you are not playing against a Bosk. I ended up playing against a Bosk one of my games, and it is, I like, this guy's like so scary to play when you have a Bosk on the other team, or on the other side of the board, just because him being able to claim double exhaust to characters like super sketchy. But 2 and a 3/3, it's for 2 costs for a 3/3 is like super nice, just like Battlefield Marine. And then even the bounty, like, you can do a couple things to get around the exhaust. You just have to be really smart with when you have him out and the order in which you play, because there are moments where sometimes you can actually, you know, intentionally suicide him into a card to trigger the bounty when all of your stuff is exhausted, or just going and sequencing your turn better so that when it comes time to play, or when it comes time that the opponent kills this card, you don't actually have anything left to exhaust. So you can outplay this bounty, which is great, because there are some bounties that, you know, there's just like 5 damage to base or 3 damage to a unit and you can't really do anything. You can get a little tricky, I guess, with some of them, but like some of those other bounties are just, there's no way around it, to get around it. But here, I think Fugitive Wookiee, you can definitely play around the bounty, and it's not too bad. And the 3/3 stats are crazy. Rickety Quad Jumper, just absolutely terrible for me. I just didn't have enough units, or enough non-units, excuse me, to make this thing worth it. I think you could do some cool stuff with it, but I have to think a little bit more on how I would use this card. I almost wonder if it would go better in like a Mando deck, but I feel like if you run a Mando deck, there's just other stuff that you'd want to run more than this. And if you run it in a control, you need something on the board to give the experience too, which if you're running control, you generally don't have too many things you care about on the board. So interesting card. I have to think more about this, but it didn't really do anything for me. I like this card a lot. Ruthless Assassin, just being a 3/1 on turn 1, because you do the 2 damage to yourself. You can also do the 2 damage to a grit unit, in which case that's almost a bonus for you. But always a safe, you know, turn 1 play. I don't mind him at all. I think he's great. Drafted a Mercenary Gunship just because 3/2 in space on turn 1, also super good. I've yet to see anyone take control of the unit. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like he's just super good because he's neutral. You can play him in every deck. And I don't know of many people who are ever going to use the take control unless somehow you've buffed this guy with a ton of upgrades. So super nice. Another Fugitive Wookiee, same thing, great against every matchup aside from the Bosk, because Bosk can also ping that unit down. Pike Sentinel was good. It was good. Yeah, no, it stopped a decent amount of things, and yeah, I think having a turn 1 Sentinel play really does slow down the opponent, and definitely think it's a super playable card. Brutal Traditions was okay. I think in a constructed deck where you have more play around killing your enemy opponents with removal, or like you have more cards that enable that, I think it's better. In the draft, I didn't really have much aside from swinging into other players' cards to really defeat enemy units, and I didn't really do that too much. I never actually utilized the action on this card in the 3 rounds that I played, so it was mainly just a 2/2 for me, upgrade because of the Gar Saxon +1, and it did its job there. Like, it was super nice to give 2/2 to whatever it was, whether it was the client I think I even attached it to Pike at one point. I put it on Sonara-san once, and that was good. So it's essentially a 2-2 that can come back with Gar Saxon. But I don't know if I would run this without Gar Saxon, just because it becomes a 1-2 and it's a little bit weaker. So yeah, maybe on this card. Always felt comfortable playing Black Sun Starfighter, just Sentinel with a 3-2. Nothing much to say about that, just solid. The client with Gar Saxon, because it's upgraded, it goes to 3-5. Amazing. This plus Gar Saxon was fantastic, at least in the draft. It was super easy for me to just use that shield once and trade something for free off the board. Or I would use this in combination with the chain code collector, and I would just bounty something, swing into something, heal the 5. I actually got to trigger the bounty on this a substantial amount of times. I'd say maybe in the entire night, I probably claimed this bounty maybe 8 times in all my games, and that's 40 damage over, you know, all those rounds, all those games. So of course that's draft, you know. In constructed, there's probably other easier ways players can remove them, but 3-5 with a shield, it's tough. They don't really want to poke into it with anything, because like the 3 damage back because of the Gar makes it so that essentially he's killing any turn 1 play, unless they played a 1-4 or something like that. But yeah, he's great. I like him. Big fan of him now. I always resource this. I don't think this is good at all. The only thing that I could see you doing with this maybe is if you had some synergy with it. So like maybe a Ray to give it a 3-6, or I actually put 3s in my like quote unquote budget Chewy Wookiee deck, just because I could play it as a 2-5 Sentinel. But I'll let you know how that goes after I play with that. But otherwise, it's just alone on its own with no synergy. It's bad. Same thing here with the first Starfighter, just decent. These underperformed for me. I actually drafted 2 Lurking TIE Phantoms. I thought they would be much better than they are. So the problem with these guys is that even though they swing for 4, which is a ton in space, they never survived long enough. And that was just because they would play, you know, a daring raid, or they would play like they just swing their 2-3 space into it or something like that. Or it dies against, you know, a Starfighter. So it was just like, I think these will be really good in constructed in the sideboard, or maybe with a Tarkin, or something to just get it out of kill range of stuff via damage. I think these will be super good, but in draft, definitely underperformed. I don't think I'd draft these again, just because there's just not enough removal that's being drafted from the other players that would really make this, you know, worth it. So probably not going to draft these, but in constructed, definitely think that these are going to be great. And look at that hyperspace. I couldn't give up on drafting this hyperspace TIE Phantom. Super nice card. Hunter of the Haxian Brood, I think he's just good for the 4-3. That's all I really used him for. I could very rarely get the synergy off of the bounties, just because I didn't have that much, despite having the client. I never was able to play the client and Hunter of the Haxian Brood. That just was never a thing. I always use him as a 4-3, and as a 4-3 he's okay. He's definitely okay. Don't really have much to say about that. This guy and the client were the MVPs. Like client and then chain code, client chain code, client chain code. You could just repeatedly kill things, whatever they played, and just -4 on it means that this guy stays alive. And it was a threat. He was such a threat to the other players, him and the client. But because the client, usually I kept the shield on him, it meant that they had to focus on this guy and like trade usually something really, really bad into it, because usually I could keep the board clear. So really like this guy. I think he's super strong, at least in draft. I'll see what he does in constructed, but I really like this card. Hut's Henchman. I never played this, just drafted it because it's a 4-4 with shield with Gar Saxon. But never, I think I resourced this every single time. Sonara-san, I played every time I drew it. It's just, it sticks to the board. It's hard to get rid of. Like 3-6 is super tough to get rid of, and especially with the grit, like very early on, they're very rarely going to be able to one-shot this thing. So what you'll end up seeing them do is they'll either swing over it to the base, or they'll try to hit it down and get it low. But like once it gets low, then I just get buffed up, right? And I swing to base. Like I think I mentioned in the last video, I swung at a base for 12 damage with Sonara-san because she had that the Relentless Traditions on, or whatever it was. So she went to a 5-8, and then I took 7 damage on her. I've used even where is he? Dr. Pershing. I've used Dr. Pershing to ping her as well. So I draw and I buff her up. So The synergy there is pretty good. And usually when I'm playing her, it means that I'm ahead on the board. It lets me, if I'm not ahead on the board, it gets me ahead on the board because they're trading into it, or I'm able to use it to trade into something else. And it usually means I'm able to step on the gas a little bit faster. And that bounty of 5 damage to a base, I don't think anyone was able to claim it against me. She just put too much pressure on the board and kept hitting. Or I think maybe it got triggered once, but it was like 5 life on their base to like 25, 27 on mine, so I didn't mind at all. So I think you could do some really cool aggro things with her. I think she's pretty good. Super Commando Squad. This card was a little dicey. I'm not gonna lie. When you play it, it feels good, especially with Gar. It's a 5/4 Sentinel, which is nice. Comes out 1 turn earlier than like the Academy Walker. It's got a little jank to it because you got to make sure that it stays upgraded, whether it's with an XP or a shield or whatever. But like I was able to heal it. So like I was able to use the covert strength, right? Out from Smuggle, get an experience on it. And now it's always a Sentinel. So I know people have compared it to the Honor Guards from last set, but I think it's more consistent than that. And I think playing the right synergy, it's super easy. Whereas the Honor Guards don't really have too much synergy because they have to remain at full health unless you're like running a ton of healing stuff. Which I don't know, maybe with these, like maybe Honor Guard gets played more. I doubt it. I like these. I also like them because they're Imperial, Mandalorian, and Trooper. So, you know, in a Tarkin deck, you can just get an XP on it and it's guaranteed to have Sentinel unless they get rid of that XP. So super fun card. I think I'd rate this like a 6 out of 10. Like it was pretty consistent, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I definitely wouldn't say it's bad. I play this every time I drew it. This without synergy was like, okay. It's not okay. Excuse me. It's bad. Every time I drew it, it was just, I would never be able to trigger the effect really because I didn't have that many bounties to play in other players' characters. I guess if you get lucky playing this into like a Ray matchup where they've got a ton of upgrades on something, then I guess it could be good, but I never really used it that night. It was always a resource. This guy. So I played this guy twice now, once in a pre-release and last night in the draft. Every time I've dropped Resourceful Pursuers in Limited, it has been fantastic. It has been absolutely amazing because they can't block it with a Sentinel. So they either have to use something to remove it or they have to swing into it. And the 6 health and the 5 makes it a big threat. It makes it a huge threat. So being able to just swing through Sentinels or even shields, like sometimes you can sneak through a shield that someone's put on a character and that 5 damage is like enough. I think that is the highest damage saboteur aside from Lando, which I think Lando is honestly from set 1. I think Lando set 1 is a sleeper unit. I think someone's going to figure out how to make him super good because I've already messed around with him a little bit back in set 1 and I thought he wasn't as bad as people say he is. I don't think. I think that 6, 5 and just grabbing 2 resources as a finisher, I think it's pretty good. But Resourceful Pursuer is just a little bit more safe, I guess you could say, because it's got that big 6 health but like I think in Constructed you're probably playing better things. But definitely I think every time I see him in Limited, if I'm drafting yellow, I'm gonna grab him. Cargo Juggernaut was okay. Once again, shielded means that he goes to a 5/6, which makes him pretty good. I think I only played him once though. I resourced him a significant amount of time just because I didn't have all the blue cards, or I didn't have any blue cards on the board. But playing him once, I think I got the effect off, so it was all right. I just didn't have enough blue cards. I don't think. If I had more blue cards, I think it would have been much better. This guy's great. Bricks the space, and then it is just devastating because, especially with Gar, right? That one experience that goes to a unit, it's technically gonna give that unit a 2/1. So it was super annoying. Every time I dropped this on the board, I could just tell in my opponent's face, like, oh god, I have to deal with this thing. So I had a lot of good, like, mid-range beefy boys. They're not even necessarily bombs. Like, they're nothing that end games. But I just had enough of these, like, 5-6 cost cards that were just, like, meaty. And it meant that there was no clean answer that most of these guys had to these problems. And it required them just swinging into it because it was, you know, this is Sentinel. The Super Commandos are Sentinel. And without, you know, enough removal, Sentinel with, like, big health and big damage is super rough. It's super rough. It's very easy to swing the game. And You know, this one, even when it swings, I can buff something else, so it just flips it even harder. It was super nice to play this card. Always played it and held on to it when I drew it. So I think I definitely think there's going to be some kind of blue black, you know, Gar-Saxon Mando deck that ends up being pretty competitive, because in constructed even, like, I think it's going to be something to look out for. Ben Rao, I didn't have enough upgrades. I resourced this dude. Without upgrades, he's terrible. Obviously, I drafted him earlier on, hoping that I could get more upgrades, but there was a Ray player that was just sucking up all the upgrades, so I didn't get to see enough of those. But I think with certain upgrades, like low cost upgrades, like the fact that you can repeat this bottom effect as many times as you want is kind of crazy. Just giving -2/-2 to something every time you play an upgrade on this unit is substantial. I never really noticed him, like, the stats being a thing. It was always the effect, like that turn that you played him, that effect. That was where the value I saw from Fenrau being played. Like when I had that Ray player play against me, he played this and then a Van Brace on top of it, or I think it was a Foundling something, and he was able to -2/-2 something. So yeah, I think someone's gonna figure out how to make an engine with the upgrade on this unit. And then my 2 removal cards, I got super fortunate to get a Rival's Fall, which was critical in blowing up Bosk, in blowing up, you know, the Ray's Voltron Follower of the Way. Rival's Fall was critical. So super good to get like the big units off the board. I did not realize Bosk came out at 5, so I was hoping to save this for the boss and kill Bosk immediately, but it came out a turn early. I was not ready for it, but it's still just like, this is such a good card. And then I was super lucky to have drafted an Evacuate. I don't know how or why this came around in the packs to me. I think it's because not many people were playing yellow, and apparently not too many people were value drafting. So I got super lucky to get this passed to me, and this was an obvious grab with yellow blue, and it was fantastic. I think bounce is going to be relevant in this set for a very long time, I think. I mean, obviously bounce is good on its own, but what it was really good against, and what this really countered, was the red yellow Bosk when he would capture with Reckless Pursuit, right? They're that bounty card that lets him capture one of my cards, and then if it's a bounty unit, he gets a shield on it. I'd let him play that. I'd let him flood the board just a little bit more. I'd deploy my leader, and then I would evacuate, and it would bounce all his stuff off the board, and it would also bounce, you know, because that card left, I'd get my captured card back. So this was a huge swinger. Definitely won me at least 3 matches, at least 3 of the matches out of like all the, what was it, the 2, 4, 6 games that I played. Definitely won. Just this card alone won me the game, got me out of a lot of tough spots. So I'm really excited to see what I could do with this. It's also super good against bounty decks, because if your characters have bounty on them and they get bounced, they don't claim the bounty. Bounty is only claimed when the character is destroyed or captured. So bounce is a good way to counter bounties on your own cards. So super nice card. I ended up pulling another one of these from the pricing packs, so now I have 3 of them, and I gotta figure out what I do. I've got some cool ideas. I've got so many ideas, dude. It's gonna get bad. The more and more cards come out, I'm gonna have more and more ideas. But that was essentially what I drafted, the review of the draft deck, my thoughts on some of the cards from this set. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and stick around. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.